I know. We met at the very beginning.
Okay.
We're trying all sorts of things. Some goes. I mean, Diane Bryant, my boss, was she's awesome. She is, and unrelenting and unapologetic for everything she does, right? So there's a lot of good things about that, right? Yeah. Anyway, this will be fun.
Okay, nice to see you.
Thanks for everything. I'm going to take off.
Okay.
Everything was awesome. It was fun. A great week. Yeah. It was great. It was really good. And I'll tell you, the next thing is, how do we get the name of the L2s of ours, whatever, in the industry to say, what are they helping us do about it? That would be...
That's what I want to see coming out of this.
Yeah. Safe travels back.
Okay.
I'll see you next week.
Okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi, Karen. Nice to meet you. Thanks for helping with the event and everything. I'm with Salesforce.org.
Yes,
so
yeah.
happy to be here.
Great. Are you in San Francisco?
Yes.
Okay.
Flew in last night, overnight, but I'm originally from here, this area. So
Oh, you are?
I'm going to meet my parents after for dinner. So that's fun.
So were you on Shope's flight? Shope from Uber? Do you know Shope?
I don't.
She red-eyed in.
Yeah. I'm going to go find her and ask.
Um,
I saw her earlier, so she's somewhere around here. I did pretty well. I had the whole thing with like the mask and the thing, and I was out the whole time.
Come to work? There you go. You probably got better sleep than we did.
Yeah. All right, I'll leave you be.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. You find soda is better to drink than water before? You find that soda is better for you to drink than water before you go? Yeah. So I woke up this. Yeah. Oh, everybody, feedback has been fantastic. Hi, are you good to start? I'm Stephanie. Hi, somebody. Atlanta. So nice to meet you. Thanks for being here today. Sorry? Emily's up here. Yeah. We just wanted to make sure you were good. Are you good to start? Perfect. Okay, perfect. Back in my assigned seat.
Yep.
Just waiting for everybody else.
And if you want to hang on to this for now, since you'll have some intro where Emily will talk to you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, perfect.
Great job.
Thank you.
Great job. I was talking to Michelle as well. You guys, great way to open it. And then every panel, diversity of thought, and the topic, including definitely the last panel where they went there. I mean, we have to do it. Those are really good stuff. So, yeah, but look at you. Let's start taking. Yeah, that was good. Great. Yeah, great pros. Great. Yeah, the theme is
Glad
good.
you're here.
So,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
When are you flying out?
Tomorrow morning.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
because there were no. Richmond is a hard place to get back to. DC easy, but Richmond's hard. So yeah, when are you going out?
4 o'clock, 4:30 this afternoon.
Oh, fantastic.
What did you
Joan, before you leave, Brian Reed, Delta Technology. I'm the new Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. Yeah, love your words. Love to continue to connect on the topic. And if you see some wild email going on, then it will be me.
Brian is like day 3 on the job.
Yeah.
So this is my very sophisticated pediatric case. I'm a pediatrician.
Hey, well, I love it. Well, love your story, love your testimony. I would like to come visit and talk, speak more. Thank you.
I want to go to Harvard Medical School.
I know. Yeah.
Can you get me in?
Why not?
I didn't do any science. I didn't do any engineering. I didn't do any of that.
Well, yes, we're looking at a more diverse and inclusive set of programs.
Even if you don't have the program, I'm gonna get a cup of coffee. Do you want?
No, fine. Thank you very much. Okay, what time are you leaving?
4:30.
Okay.
Flying out to Minneapolis.
Oh, I heard you. Yeah, you're gonna. Okay. Good. And then you'll be back home this weekend, or are you gonna?
Sunday.
Sunday. Okay. Well, good. Very proud of you. Yeah. Now I got to start tweeting. I got some good pictures of you. Now I'm gonna post tweeting. It's fun to do it in real time. I'm a little anxious now.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The discussion will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats so the discussion can begin shortly.
Ladies and gentlemen, could you please be seated? We're going to get started in just a moment.
Joan got her caffeine. Hi, I'm Karen. Hi, Karen. How are you? Thanks for being here. Thank you. I love the, what did you say? Dick is the synonym for jerk?
I just feel like kids are great.
Yes.
It's important to have a conversation.
I teach my kids language like, he's a sort of what's
There you go. Where are you?
I live in Austin. And the 600 Hill. Yeah.
Very good.
I just love Boston in the fall.
Beautiful place. Absolutely beautiful.
So how long have you been at the medical
Interesting
school?
form. 27 years.
Good afternoon, everyone. Could I have your attention, please? We're going to get started. Hello. I'm delighted to welcome everyone back. I'm Emily Actor-Zandi, Managing Director of Atlantic Live, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this smaller special conversation after our larger convening. I'm excited to have this group and hear other perspectives. As we all know, a number of amazing individuals and organizations are working throughout the STEM pipeline to increase the success of girls and young women. And many focus their efforts on a particular developmental or educational stage, be it early childhood, college, or early career. And yet the pipeline loses many girls and young women every year. And the reasons are varied and complex. But as many young women drop out of STEM at a number of crucial stages in their development, many never reach the workforce. So we're here today with this group of thought leaders to do a deeper dive into how those various stakeholders can work together to more effectively support girls and young women at every stage. And we have an extraordinary group, some of our panelists joining us from the earlier program. No doubt each of you here and again in our audience have compelling stories to share. And our goal today is really to hear as many perspectives as possible. We want to listen closely to one another and ultimately have a rich and productive conversation. First, I want to take a moment. My mic is going out. Our underwriter, Dell, for making this roundtable possible. And I'm delighted that, again, we have Chief Customer Officer Karen Quintos, who's joining us. And Karen will make a few framing remarks in just a moment. Also, Steve Clemens is here with us to my left. Steve is going to play our Phil Donahue role today. And Steve is Atlantic Live's editor-at-large. You probably recognize him from his frequent MSNBC. He's on all the time. And he is an expert at facilitating and conversations. Before we dive in, a few housekeeping notes. I think everyone will notice that we are having this session taped. This is going to be an on-the-record conversation. We also have someone from Dell's creative team who is going to be articulating the conversation and sort of drawing out the artistry of everything that's going on right behind us. So this should be a really interesting way. Stacy is with us, how we foster stronger collaboration, and we're going to sort of bring this conversation to life through art. And I think we're going to wrap up around 12:45. Before we dive in and Karen makes some remarks, I want everyone here at the front to very quickly introduce themselves.
Wait. Yes, you can. Everybody can introduce themselves, but as you do it, real quickly, I want you to tell me a institution, a person, not by name, unless you want to, or something that you see as a villain or an impediment to succeeding in this. Okay, it'll help me remember all of you.
Great. So with that, but we want to make this brief so we have enough time for the conversation. Think of it as professional haiku plus that. I would like to start here to my right.
Suzanne Harper, Senior Director of National STEM Strategy at Girl Scouts of the USA. I am a Girl Scout. I do not see villains. I see future partners.
Hi, I'm
A warm and fuzzy type.
I'm Abigail Lewis. I'm the Vice President for Leadership Programs and Campus Initiatives at the American Association of University Women. Besides Steve, just joking. But I would say the media, in terms of stereotypes that still kind of keep girls from thinking that they can't be in STEM careers.
Good one.
I'm Eric Hopfer from MIT, father of Maya from earlier. I guess I would say a villain might be narrow-mindedness.
Hi, I'm Andy Karabutas, Chief Information Digital Officer at National Grid and formerly at Dell, which I'm very proud of to always see sponsoring here. I see Dell as an advocate in helping propel forward in Wayne State University, my alma mater in Detroit, Michigan, where I graduated in computer science, and they are colorblind, they are gender blind, they are just promoting education and really driving forward, and I've never forgotten that.
Hello, I'm Cheryl Poro with Salesforce.org, and there I am Senior Vice President of Technology and Product Delivery. And I would say, in my early days, graduating as a chemical engineer, becoming a software engineer, the villain in my story could often be myself. But I've done a great job of getting rid of those demons.
Interesting.
I'm Lena. I'm a graduate student at MIT. I also led the biotech group at Harvard and was one of the only women in that group. I guess the villain for me along the way has been people who thought that this conversation is over.
Right. Thank you.
My name is Alec Resnick. I'm with Powderhouse Studios. I guess I already named two, Men in Schools, but I'll add a third, which is just the idea of meritocracy.
Joan Reed, Harvard Medical School. So if I had to name a villain, I would say bias, unconscious and conscious.
Joan stole my answer.
Mine too.
And down the road. I'm Karen Quintos. I'm Dell's Chief Customer Officer.
And do you know me? I'm Steve Clemens with The Atlantic. My villain actually is close to Joan, that in every, I grew up as an Air Force dependent in the military, and this would have been in the 1960s, and I was appalled at the low expectations of women and people of color and others. I mean, it was an institution so important in the United States, and they sort of pride themselves on being, a mixer and a promoter of others. But actually, it was a pretty bad institution for people's horizons.
I'm Christine Cunningham. I'm a vice president at the Museum of Science here in Boston. And it gets harder as you go down the line. I'd say one that hasn't been mentioned is access. So access to opportunities, access to resources.
Hi there, I'm Deborah Goldfarb with Intel. Their Senior Director of Market Intelligence and their Chief Analyst. Villains, Prince Charming.
Do you know you win? That's pretty good.
How long did it take you to come up with that one? So good afternoon, I guess, at this time. I'm Julie Duane, and I actually work for the General Electric Company. And I was going to say bias as well, but I actually want to emphasize the point that it's in all of us. And we as a company have recently been really delving into this area, and I realize how much my own person brings, implicit bias on many different fronts.
Hi, my name is Catherine Newman. I'm the Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at the University of Massachusetts System Office. And I think the enemy is the assumption that these things can't be changed, or that it's even that difficult to change them. But we need to be systematic in this attempt to change them and show the evidence that it can be changed so that the investment of academic institutions, of corporations like those that are represented here, will be well rewarded by uptaking those new approaches.
Hi, I'm Shobs. I lead IT for Uber. I think we had a lot of really great answers on villain, but something which wasn't mentioned before. In my life, I think sometimes the villain has been my loving, extended family or society who wanted to protect me rather than support me in terms of failures from new experiences.
Hi, I'm Andrea Beatty, and I'm the author of Rosie Revere Engineer and Ada Twist Scientist. I think that
I can't wait till you sign my copies.
I am so signing his copies, too. I am. But I'm going to use someone else's name. No, I'm kidding. Oh, thank you. Thank you. But I love them. I think a very fundamental villain is definitions and how we define science as information and answers and not questions. And that when we turn that around, that's going to make a massive difference. And also Snidely Whiplash, because that guy, what a villain.
That was my hero.
Michelle Bailey, IDC, International Data Corporation here in Massachusetts. We like to say data is our middle name. I think the big villain at the moment is this notion of alternate facts. I believe that the data is the data, and we can't deny what the data is telling us, and so we should work towards solutions.
Good afternoon, or good morning, I believe. I'm Jeffrey Roy, and I am so grateful that along this panel, I was so hopeful that no one would say that government is the villain. I'm the state representative. I work in the Massachusetts House of Representatives, and if I was to suggest to you a villain, I would say a villain is somebody who suggests that government is bad and government can't help, because we want to be partners with industry and people, and as Barney Frank said, government is that which we choose to do together. You are the government by the people, and to perpetuate this myth that government is a villain only can come from a villain.
I had a double take today. I know I'm not supposed to speak yet, but when I was looking at Jeff's bio, it has this website, http://MA legislature. So if you think about that, I was reading it as male legislature, and I said, and I had just met, little bits, and I said, you need a gender neutral. So you work on that, okay?
Well,
Sorry.
thank you, everyone. And I think we had one other, if you wanted to introduce yourself here.
Oh, there's my little bits. Yeah.
Hi. Hi, I'm Little Bits. No, my name is Aya. I'm the founder and CEO of Little Bits, and I'm an engineer myself. I think, now I forgot the answer. No, I remember. I think the villain actually is toy companies, because I think toy companies for the last few generations, this didn't used to be the case many decades ago, but the last few generations have been creating very crappy, very gendered toys where a lot of the critical thinking, the robotics, and the construction products were made for boys, and girls were all about decorating and glitter and pink and feathers. And I think it's time to change that. That's what we're trying to do.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So Karen, I'd love to pass to you to just make some opening remarks before Steve takes over.
Sure. Thank you. And I want to do a huge shout out to the Atlantic magazine and the events that they do. They've been a fantastic partner. They have a long-standing relationship with Dell and have a ton of credibility in many, many areas, including this one. I also wanted to do a huge thanks to all of you. You are here because you share the same passion and the same interest and the same impatience around this subject. And when we sat together, almost a year ago, and said, wow, there is a lot of activity that is going on in this whole area around STEM, how do we get more women and minorities into STEM? We said there's a lot of activity, there's been some recent progress, but how does the public sector and the private sector come together and make some big bets? Leverage a lot of the great ideas and programs, because I fundamentally feel like better together, we could really move the needle. So that's really what this session is all about. I want to give huge thanks to the speakers that are here also, and I'm really looking forward to walking away with some really interesting ideas that companies like Dell Technologies, GE, Uber, the government, many of you in this room can really get behind.
Steve,
Oh,
take it away.
Okay, now allowed to go. Okay, great. First of all, thank you. So let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to have a conversation. We have a lot of folks up here. We were going to have a roundtable conversation just with these folks, but we thought we would get more done if we, let people that are truly obsessed with this issue, and that's all of you, into it. But we're going to have a conversation amongst ourselves, and how we're going to do this a little bit is I want you to put me out of business. I'm not going to call on you. If you don't speak up, you lose. Okay. So, but I would really like to get everyone to engage. Don't wait for me to kind of. But I think our task today is not to reframe the entire debate. Let's presume we all know the game. We all know what's already going on. We know that there's a set of needles that need to be moved, and that we begin with the presumption to some degree that whether by their own choice of wanting to go out and pursue something else, or be because of false expectations or perhaps of life issues, people are falling out of a word that my friend Abigail has shared that she's not incredibly fond of, but I'm going to come back to her later to talk about pipeline, because it may sound perhaps overly prescriptive, but kind of this broad notion that when you look at people who are transforming our society, benefiting from the society, making a good living out of that there are too few, that there's not equity in that arena. So I'd like to kind of have a more action-oriented discussion to sort of look at what people think can be instituted or done, as opposed to relitigating a lot of the other issues. So if we can be more on that, then this will be different than what we did in the other room. It'll help us get beyond first principles and get on, build on those to kind of go another. And I want to ask, and I also know that this is personal for people. It's both personal for your own lives, which that makes it real. And so I'm going to go to Karen again, not because I want to be nice for her, she's the Dell lady, but I want to go because we had a drink last night, and she talked about her daughter. And so I just want to use the daughter experience as a way to kick this off for a moment. You didn't. Are you mad that I set you up?
No.
Okay, good.
I'm
so,
actually wondering if my daughter is going to
yeah.
be really happy that I'm going to be telling her story. No.
Yeah, great. Just but tell us, quick snapshot of what you're concerned, because you captured it beautifully, and go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm a mother of 3, a son and 2 daughters. I have a daughter, Carmela, who is 18, and she just recently enrolled in Vanderbilt, so she's very smart, smarter than her mom. I watched her through her middle school and through her high school go from wanting to be a doctor, wanting to be an astronaut, wanting to be an engineer. And in that junior, senior year, there was just something that happened that pivoted her away from it. And I actually know what it is. The other thing I should tell you is one of our very, very senior leaders, one of my peers at Dell, took her under his wing to put her through a day in the life of what an engineer does at Dell. And she came back super excited. It was about graphics. It was about new technology. It was about what our technology can enable in the world, sustainability, a lot of the themes that we heard here. She had a physics teacher in high school. She had a bad experience with a 2-day so-called internship that they sent her to the most boring company and the most boring engineering job. And she came back and she said, I'm not doing engineering. This is so boring. It's not at all what you tell me is happening at Dell. She's going into math, going into economics, so she's kind of staying in that area. But it's just really, really concerning to me that you start to see these things so many times.
Thank you very much. So I want to ask people to react to that. And Julie, I was going to go to you and say, is GE culture better than Dell culture?
No, I think they're at least equal, if not so. The question at hand. Look, this is what we're really focusing on too within GE, which is you have to make the experience resonate with whether it's the student, the young professional, and male, female. It has to connect with them. And so, the more important thing is, how do you get after doing that? So when you are out in the classrooms, when you are out in the communities, when you are bringing your, fresh young talent into the company, how do you give them experiences that resonate with them and give them that sense of purpose? And so I think that is, part and parcel.
Julie, how long have you been at GE?
Oh, long. I started right out of elementary school.
Right. Yeah.
I've been there.
Okay.
I've been there now for 30 years. So I have spent my entire career.
5-year-old genius.
Yes.
No, I asked that because I listened to this and I'm sort of listening to these questions. You remember I don't even know if they exist anymore. I'm not into them, but there used to be these private downtown clubs, city club this, university club that. They were male clubs. You would go in and they were slow to take in people of color. They were slow to take in women. They would often be obnoxiously bigoted towards, but that's where they did business. And I'm just sort of wondering whether that culture has been part of something that you penetrated early, and did you have to, over your 30 years in GE, kind of have to nudge it, move it? Because 30 years ago, GE is not what GE is today. I'm sure, I want to comment about Dell. I mean, 5 years ago, Uber wasn't it is today, right? You've changed a lot. So I think I hear, you have to tell me. But I mean, has it really changed dramatically?
So it's changed dramatically, and it's changed in ways that only have fostered the ability for everybody to be successful.
Right.
And so I'd be remiss, to tell you that I haven't had my share of challenges, but I also think life is about challenges. And I think this notion of not letting this generation realize that they are going to have stumbling blocks, and it's about your resiliency, it's about your persistence. I love some of what the panel was saying, because that's the true kind of how you grow up and you mature, is you realize you can break your way through those things.
Panelists, by the way, do what Karen just did. She just grabbed the mic, tell me that she's
Yeah.
going to take over. So grab the mic when you want to speak. Just go ahead.
I'd like to give GE some credit, and actually one of the companies, as we were thinking through this whole, where can we collaborate with other companies that share our passion in this area? I mean, I know Beth Comstock incredibly well.
Right.
She's made a big, bold statement around the hiring of STEM, and the huge pivot that she's going to go and the company's going to go put on women and minorities.
Right.
And I thought about something like that, and I said, so what if we did something and aligned to that? What if we did something that supported that? What could we all collectively do together to support a lot of these big, bold statements and commitments that are being made out there? And how do we make sure GE doesn't fail? Dell has the same challenge that GE has. There are not enough talent out there in the area of big data, machine learning, AI, engineering, technology, whatever it is, and it scares us at Dell to think about where are we going to go get this talent? So
Catherine?
that's a big part of why we're having this conversation.
So let me add, you can find them in the universities. But the way in which we ensure that you have a sufficient supply runs straight through the anecdote you just told, Julie. It makes a huge difference to students who are in that STEM pipeline if somebody visibly successful like Julie recounts her setbacks, because she's a living example of the overcoming of those setbacks. And then the interpretation of a setback is not, I don't belong in this field and I should never end up at GE. It's, oh, Julie got over a setback, everyone can get over a setback. That is a social, psychological, scientific fact. So it's something we need to understand isn't just a personal experience, it's actually something we know clinically, in a sense, about how people interpret the evidence that comes from a setback.
Andy and then Deb? Oh, go ahead, Deb. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, you were quicker on the draw.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
I want to react to that around, we talked earlier around how kids identify with their peer groups. If, if you're a young girl and your friends are snapping out into something different, you feel less inclined. It's the same in business, right? So one of the things I do a lot at Intel is help women find a voice. Okay, I mean, women are always apologizing. I mean, whether they're kids this big or they're women who have unbelievable
Deb,
accomplishments.
how open are you about Intel's upper tier culture?
How open am I?
I mean, your upper tier culture, because I've known your upper tier
Yeah,
culture for generations.
so-
Not a lot of women in that upper tier
look,
culture.
just like I've been in tech for over 35 years, okay? And much like you, I mean, you kind of navigate a landscape that has institutional biases
Right.
and structures. They exist. They exist in business, they exist in academia, they exist everywhere. So you have to, this is why it all goes back to voice, okay? Whether you're in tech or non-tech, it doesn't matter. The feeling that a woman or a girl or a kid is worthy of expressing themselves, whether in any which way, matters from day one. It's one of the reasons why they snap out of the quote-unquote STEM pipeline, because they don't have the natural sense of self that they can go do it. So the minute they don't see peers that look like them, or someone tells them no, their experience, their sense of self, their own self-confidence isn't sufficient enough to break through that. So you broke through it because, and there are corner cases, right? You break, I am, you are, right? Everyone's sitting at this table. You break through it because somehow, somewhere in this little voice inside of you said, I can, right? But I cannot tell you, you asked about the senior management at Intel. There aren't a lot of women. We're a manufacturing culture. It is a very male-dominated culture, but it's changing inch by inch, like many of the tech companies. Some of our voices, Diane Bryant recently took a leave of absence. She was a tremendously vocal advocate, but there are many of us who dig in and pull people forward and do literally arm combat. It's not about negatives. It's about how do you build a voice? How do you stop saying sorry?
Before I jump to Andy, I mean, I know Intel works with high schools in the Bay Area, and you're working with high school students, and there are a lot of women among those high school students, and I know that part of the drop-off happens at that jump from high school to college.
Absolutely.
Do you do any tracking? Do you do?
Yeah,
I mean,
so,
what are the
well,
things that you think you can do?
We're a metric company. But I personally ran programs in the northern suburbs out of Chicago in very disadvantaged high schools.
Right.
And we ran these, we partnered with Project Lead the Way and Autodesk, and we ran these we call them Next Generation Innovators Challenge. So they had, kids had these real world things they had to go work on, they had to build a business plan, it was incredible. And the learnings that these were kids who were using supercomputers who had never even really done anything but play games on a computer. I mean, so we coached them, we had Oregon National Lab building mentorships, we did this incredible thing. What's amazing about that, those kids, the team that won that challenge went off to sell their patent to J&J, okay? They built this multi-purpose prosthetic device. But it's amazing when you keep kids parameters, mentor them through it, what comes out of that. I mean, and the women in that, we have a video for it. It was extraordinary. So we track it closely, and we do hands-on kinds of engagements. And when you do that, you pay attention to the little things, it actually works, right? It's scaling it becomes the challenge, right?
I just want to also, not to dwell on Intel for a minute, but you took over the Westinghouse prizes. And I go to the Intel prizes each year of the best science by high school students. Unbelievable women there have done unbelievable things. I meet them, and I was there with Gordon Moore one time, and Andy Grove came to one of these dinners, and they're blown away by the science that these women have done who've gone off. And I said, what are you going to do with them? And he says, well, we're going to try to do patent partnerships on the best, hire some. So anyway, I just want to say congratulations, because I do think part of this thing of celebrating success and bringing is part of the game. Andy.
Yeah, so I love what everybody has said, and there's not one comment I wouldn't agree with. There's a fundamental thing, though, and I hate to be the one that's always a little
I love that about you.
Okay, but we have to teach our young people, and especially our girls, that just because it's hard doesn't mean you won't like it. Getting up in the morning and working out is hard, okay? But you know, you get through it, you see the benefits, et cetera. So somehow I love that we're trying to inspire, attract, and develop, but we also have to expose a lot more, and some of it has to be through tough curricula, which makes it okay. 11% of PhDs, at least a couple of years ago, were to international students, but 50% of all of those were in technology fields. And if we do learn, there was a question from the audience in the other session that said, is there something we can learn from other cultures, et cetera? Doesn't mean we have to adopt, but something we can learn. And what are the percentages in some other countries? We heard from my colleague Usha. I was never more proud than to have somebody in the National Grid organization that was the first geologist in South Africa. Somehow I don't think South Africa was sort of throwing her games and toys and robotics and all the rest. That doesn't mean that's what, you know, we go hardcore the other way. But there are things that we can learn, and there is a attract, a pull, and expose, et cetera. But there's also a let's look at our curriculum and what it's doing.
Can I ask you a quick question? You know, it may be beyond, you know, the stage already because people have chosen, they volunteered, and I mentioned in a negative way the military, but I actually think the military can be very positive. That there are a lot of men and women that go in the military, they get trained for things they would never have thought they'd be trained. So much of it is in high technology, engineering, computer science. I think we have some problems with people coming out of the military, making sure they have, you know, great opportunities. I know GE and Dell and others hire folks that were in there, but you know, it has occurred to me that if I were given limited resources and limited time and wanted to make a quick impact on society, I would go to the government, though you got to get a bigger job, and say, you know what, I want to have more women that are hired for these positions, trained for these. It's a command economy approach as opposed to, you know. And so I just wonder if that resonates for you at all.
It completely resonates, and I'll tell you, at National Grid, we do exactly what Dell does, and my former colleagues at Biogen do. We have labs. We bring kids in from 6th, 7th, 8th grade, et cetera. But there is that element of showing where innovation and creativity could be. There's also the more militaristic side. We don't send people up on pylons to do distribution of electricity and say, try something out, right? It's a disciplined engineering process, and people like sometimes that disciplined engineering process. So we can learn something from
Abigail, I get a sense you're on a completely different side of the equation, right?
Not entirely.
Okay.
When I talk about the problem with the pipeline is...
A little closer.
Okay. The problem with the pipeline is that it's been the same for a long time, and we keep saying it's leaky, it's not working. We have a lot of smart engineers in this room. I'm smart, I'm just not an engineer. We can build something better that actually reflects more of the issues that we're talking about, where there's no on and off ramps in a pipeline, right? So what do we do when 40% of our students are in community colleges and they're taking a different route, but we're not acknowledging them or the work they're doing because we have ideas of where you're supposed to be coming out of university? How are we responding to underserved communities? How are we responding to people who don't have that same access? If we have one pipeline, we're also discounting women who take time off for their careers for their family at different parts of their time. So how can we build something better that reflects, as my colleague at Harvard Medical School said, intersectional approach, right? And I don't want to build 5,000 new pipelines that are all running parallel. We can create something that actually...
How about a huge, crazy river?
Sure.
Yeah.
But also the thing with a pipeline is that who's creating the boundaries that they come up against, right? So we can get them at age 5 or age 6. At AUW, we look at solutions. We're looking to work better with our 12-year-olds. How do we work with them once they hit high school, college, keep going on?
Right.
But if they're constantly facing, let's say, a hostile work environment, how are we changing that? And I think all the companies here are working to change that, but we can't think of those boundaries anymore. We have to think beyond that. We have to think wider to really reflect society.
Thanks. Aya?
So I have a couple of comments about what was said before. So, Andy, I really like what you said about curriculum needing to be harder and figuring out how to do that. And there's a really interesting quote by a leading education theorist and world leader, Seymour Papert, who passed away last year, who says every game designer has learned something that curriculum designers have not learned, which is kids don't do things because they're easy, and kids don't quit doing them because they're hard, because games are hard. They stop doing school because it's not fun. And so we have figured out, society has figured out how to make learning fun. We know that learning through play is fun. We know learning through making is fun. And there is countless research that proves that it is very, very effective. I see this every day. We have kids in our office every Friday. We do playtesting sessions. We do workshops with schools. We do online challenges where we invite them. We know what works. I see it every time. I see it. We get letters from girls that say that they wanted to be a fashion designer. Now they want to be a scientist. We get letters from parents that say that their young girls were self-selecting out of every engineering and technology class or after-school program, and now they have all these ideas for robots and assistive technology and things that they want to do. We see it. It's working. We know. We have a formula. My challenge is I run a startup and I have something that I know can be world changing. We have investors, we have customers, everything is great, but I want to 10x what we do, and we need partners to do that. We don't have 10,000 people on the street. We don't have 100,000 people in a sales force. We don't have government connections. We need to be able to say, look, this is the formula. Let's spread the word, get it out, because everybody benefits.
I want to go to Joan, but I want to ask you one thing. A couple of years ago, I think it was a couple of years ago, we had an Atlantic magazine cover story by Hannah Rosen called The Wired Child, and it was sort of her journey with her children that she thought were just coded differently now, and it was a really powerful piece. I recommend for those of you who are into the subject, and it went very much along the lines. And I sometimes wonder, and I want to also come to Lena after I come to Joan, is you are our token young person here. Yeah, I'm joking. We're all young, but you were at Harvard. You came in as a student and you sort of changed the game. But whether or not some of what's happening and some of what we're reflecting on that. I don't want to say we're overstating the problem, but some kids are coming packaged with capabilities that 20 years ago none of us would have had, or 10 years would have had. So there's something that's reaching them. It may be gaming.
I'm lucky to be on the fringe of like being a millennial and not being a millennial, and I understand kind of both worlds. And I have a younger sister, and we're very in touch with kids. They're not wired differently. They're really not wired differently. They are just consuming different media. They're consuming different technologies, and that's what's being given to them. They love hands-on play. They love disconnecting from the screen if there's something fun for them to do. But you're gonna tell them play with wooden blocks, like that's not as engaging as playing Minecraft. And so we have to find things that are at the fringe of both. So I think it's less. Looking at them like this, obscure creature that is wired differently. And it's more saying, what are the things that you love and how do we inject kind of more learning and more engagement and more STEM in it? And again, the solutions, there are many prototypes of these solutions working. It just needs bigger organizations and parties and companies to help amplify it, because no offense, but you guys are not going to be able to prototype these ones. So take what exists and just make it bigger.
I just can't tell you what you've just done to me in terms of basically implying that millennials are the older generation. It's really played with my sense of gravity. And then Michelle, and then Joan.
Yeah. Joan, I'm sorry. I'm dying to hear what you have to say.
Everyone is.
Everything.
But what were you going to say?
I think we talk a lot about consumer technology with our children and how impactful that is on their lives. What really has driven me in the last year to get involved has been what I see with the data. And we're about to see a tsunami of technology, computing in every aspect of not just our consumer lives, but our business lives as well. Karen said it earlier. Every company is going to become a technology company. Every company is moving towards digital. The jobs are moving towards digital, and yet we have a pipeline that looks worse in some respects than what it did 20 years ago. So I think when Andy talks about the curriculum in our schools, I think she's really hitting the nail on the head. When I went to my son's open house the other night, he had this fantastic history teacher. I mean, the guy was inspiring the way he made them think about the world that has been. I think we need to have curriculum in our schools that talks about the future and where
Right.
the future is heading.
June.
So now I have 2 points because you spoke first. So I'm going to speak to that
Yeah,
point
yeah.
first, and it's this issue of data. And as I listen to you and you talk about the corporations, you talk about presence or lack of presence in leadership, I actually think that we need to start to look at the data around what do we do, what are our processes, what are the experiences, what are the ways in which we reinforce exactly what we have. And I don't think there's enough of that examination. So as an example, I was a Pathfinder Award winner from NIH to come up with new methodologies to understand how we could advance diversity. And part of what we did was to pull together data from public and private across Harvard so that we could start to understand where are the blocks, what are the experiences of women, minorities in our organization, so we could target specific efforts, have interventions, but look at outcomes. And oftentimes our outcome is a checkbox in terms of numbers, and that's not adequate. It's got to be about inclusion. But I want to turn to what I wanted to say from the start. I have lots of problems with the term pipeline.
You can join,
Lots of
you and
problems
Abigail can
with
get
the
an
term
alliance,
pipeline.
yeah.
But my reason, so I said earlier, I'm a pediatrician. And when I think about pipeline, I'm not mechanical. I think about my car just parked someplace, I drove off, and there's something left on the ground. That is not people. We talk about a leaky pipeline as though someone is lost forever. And there's a path or one right road or one right place that they're supposed to go. And I think about all of our careers as a journey, and I would venture a guess that every single one of us started down one road, and we switched when there was a bridge or a block, and we went in another direction. What does it mean to a child when I say that there is a pipeline and you have leaked out? What have you just said to the person? So when I think about your daughter, I think of it in terms of maybe she's going to do something amazing that can combine this love of math and what she's doing here and be innovative and creative and do something we haven't even thought of. It's not a loss. And she may come back to it later. It's not a loss forever. I think we have to change our frame of reference.
Yeah, I think Joan's hitting on a key
Right.
point, because I agree with you. I actually think there's a massive rebranding that needs to happen around this notion of STEM. And because it's old thinking, right? It's when I say it's old thinking, old paradigms. You know, we heard a lot about role models, storytelling, bring those stories to life, show people and women and minorities that technology sits in so many different places. And so I agree with you. But it's, you know, I feel like at times you're having these conversations with folks, and it's like a 1970 reference point.
Can I throw that out? I mean, you folks that are engaged in this should write these pieces. You should write op-eds. You should challenge. You know, Sheryl Sandberg talked about pipelines. So Sheryl Sandberg's book was one of the most read books out there. It creates a frame for people, whether you like it or not. And what I find interesting is in the battle of ideas, of changing things, you know, challenging that frame and bringing something that sort of seems to work, that seems more empowering. I just want to add an editorial reference. People like a place like the Atlantic thrive on that kind of debate, and it would be useful. I would say to the community of people in this room who are doing this, there are a lot of fantastic people, but perhaps you need to kind of communicate at another level and engage and wrestle with these things more openly, because it's a lot of cliches and anachronisms in this debate. So I agree with it, but I also think you got to see why that scaffolding is there. It's because there were incumbents that laid out that scaffolding, and no one's taken it down yet. So it needs to go beyond this room. Eric?
Yeah, I want to just tie a couple of the pieces that I've heard here that are really wonderful together. So one is on this notion of the consumer versus the school. I mean, one of the more reasons why we work in schools is because of equity. I mean, so we can reach some people through home. Those tend to be the more privileged kids. And so trying to figure out ways we can work with schools is really important. And I want to actually build on something that you said about the idea of Pappert's hard fun. And in fact, one of the things we try to do when we think about our design is not sort of designing things to make them, and I think Little Bits is an example of this. It's not about making learning fun, it's about showing that learning is fun. because these kinds of endeavors have a lot of interest in them. It's not sort of
We all want to grow up in your household, I think, now. Again.
But there's this idea of chocolate-covered broccoli.
Yeah.
I didn't invent that term, but the idea that you sort of try to make something fun in
Right.
learning. And what we want to do is actually show people that learning is fun. It's not about teaching the girls
Yeah.
that this is.
Lena?
Yeah, so I think to respond to some of the comments from a student perspective, I think some of the things that have stood out to me have been about
Tell people what you did, though.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I was the president of the Harvard Biotech Association, which was a group made to inspire people to go into biotech. I've known for a long time that I wanted to work in that industry and in the startup space in Kendall Square. But I think a lot of people don't know what biotech is. And for the group, we have a lot of people come in to speak from the industry. And when I joined the group, when I was leading the group, it was me and 8 males. And when I left, the board was 50-50, and that was kind of my agenda within the group, was to try to bring in women, and hopefully, if enough women could see the same speakers that I was seeing, more women would want to join biotech, because even at the level of a college student, I think we decide that people can self-select at that point, and that if a woman doesn't want to apply to join the board, or if she doesn't want to go to the event, then she can decide for herself. And I think that I can't speak to the high school experience because I went to an all-girls school for 7 years and was never taught to think anything other than that I could do something, or that science was made for me and it was just time to try and fail. But I think that we stop at the college level a lot of the times. And I think that there are definitely inequalities at the high school level and the elementary school level that we can deal with. But I think that at the college level, when we decide that everyone can just be free acting adults, which is great, I think we stop encouraging things like that. And I think for me, yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, I think it's wonderful what you're saying. I just want to ask a point of clarification. When you're now at MIT and you left Harvard, so Harvard's where you did this cool thing with the board. After you left, did the board stay diversified? Oh, it did.
So I think it ended up taking...
Sign of a true leader. Good.
I think it ended up taking women on the board to encourage other women to join the organization as a whole. I think I think for me, I never really thought about it. It was me and guys in the room, and it had been that way for a long time, and I never really thought about it. But when it came to encouraging people to apply, I think that it was kind of a cycle that just kept going, right? Guys would encourage their friends to apply, and a lot of women just couldn't really break through. And I think it wasn't that they were scared to. I just think that by some process, I think we were reflecting the industry, right? Most of the speakers were guys. We did not bring in women CEOs until I was in charge, and thought, hey, for the last 15 speakers that we've had, they've all been guys. Like, maybe we should think about it. And I don't think it should have taken a woman in the room, and I'm not really sure what mechanisms can be in place. Maybe from the level of the university, they can work on looking at student groups like this, and especially kind of career-oriented groups. And if you notice that it's only one group, then I think that's worth the university stepping in and just asking whether or not you've thought about it.
Right. Thank you, Christine.
I want to talk to 2 points. One goes back to the pipeline conversation, and we actually had this debate in about 1998, 2000, and at least in the academic circles, which really didn't filter out, and they sort of decided that pipeline was a bad idea for many of the reasons that you talked about, and the word that they came up to replace it with was pathways.
Pathways.
There's a lot more opportunities, a lot more on-off ramps if you talk about pathways than a pipeline. So it's just funny that it hasn't stopped.
I don't know. You could get lost off the pathway, and that sounds like I don't know. I just got my mind always goes to the negative. So anyway, thank you. Yes.
The second thing I'd like to circle back to that's been discussed is this idea of what do we teach getting back to schools. I too work in schools and public schools because I believe in equity.
Right.
And so we've been able to reach 15 million children through our Engineering as Elementary project, and these are kids in every single range. And I think it's interesting to think about revolution and massive change, but fundamentally when you're working with little kids, as I said, they're the same that they were millennial ago, genetically speaking. So how do we think about what's developmentally appropriate in the best interest of the kids to go out into a world that we don't know what it's going to look like in 25 years? And so if we start thinking about the attributes of learning and what we want to instill in kids, there are many, many different on and off ramps, but those kind
Are you guys doing that?
we are doing that. So
I mean, I get. I mean, these things. Oh, we need to do X. I just want to know what you're doing. If you're fixing the problem, then other people can do other things.
Engineering is elementary, as I mentioned this morning, we were the first people to be thinking in
Right.
the elementary space. So I
Right.
So none of these are specific to any specific technology. We use very easily accessible materials so that kids who maybe haven't had access to resources can come in and they can look at, we make Play-Doh, water,
Right.
salt, flour.
Right.
You can do a lot of engineering materials, chemical engineering on Play-Doh. That's familiar. You can do higher stuff with robotics. So it's the kinds of things you're trying to teach the kids to do. So 15 years from now or 20 years from now, they've built a range of habits of mind that allow them to go out
and be
Right.
successful wherever the world might be. And I think it's moving too quickly for us to know where that is.
So I'm going to ask folks to speak more in a couple of sentences than paragraphs. We're at lightning round time, and I want to get the audience in. So lightning round time. Shabs?
I actually wanted to go back to the subject of
If we can do
academia.
it briefly. Yep, go ahead.
Briefly, I have an 8-year-old nephew, 11-year-old niece, and when I compare my life with them, I actually worry that if I had the option of dropping out of these STEM subjects when I'm still stupid, but when I was really, really stupid and young, my life would have been different. So I think one of the points Adi was making, and I'm passionate about, is the possibility of having very strong curricula, that it stays as an option and you're not allowed to drop it. I completely agree with make it fun, all of those other things. Obviously, we all know there is no one silver bullet, but having both of them go hand in hand is something which I think would be very beneficial.
Andrea?
Thank you. Yeah, so the discussion about, call it pipelines, pathways,
Right.
swimming pools, whatever people are in before
You're
they
right.
go
Is
there.
there a better word?
No, but
Okay.
talent pool maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think
Don't drown in the talent pool.
Don't drown and get out of the gene pool, but don't drown in the talent pool. I think the key thing for all of this to be able to come into these marvelous programs that educate at the elementary level up through college and then into industry is really starting young. And one of the things that I think we can do, and there are people doing it, is to combine STEM literacy with our literacy programs. So people like Reading is Fundamental, First Book, these groups are out there making a big difference, and they need funding, they need support, because they are taking to places that are not seeing access already.
Right.
They are really making a
Thank you,
difference.
Samantha.
So I've identified a villain finally, which is the tyranny of the GPA. And I was thinking about what you were saying about, I totally agree about hard fun and about making things more rigorous. One of my fears sometimes in Girl Scouts is that we can have elementary schools get very excited, engaged, and have fun doing STEM, and then they get to middle school and they hit Algebra 2. And I think we really need to, we were talking, Christine and I were talking earlier about
So
doing
Suzanne, just tell me real quick, how would you change that?
well, what I was going to say was to have a campaign to support the idea of failure. So failure meaning if I fail a test, it's actually a diagnostic of what I need to do to get stronger, not an indication that I should not go into this field. When I first started at Girl Scouts and I was very naive, I told my boss I wanted to do a badge called Failure, the Failure Badge, and she was like, no, we're not doing that. But I still think it's a good idea. So just the idea of changing people's minds around what it means to take on tough things and fight through it.
Isn't that kind of, I mean, I love this idea. I really love this. This is a big idea. But you know, it's interesting in business, you have it there. I mean, if you want to look at entrepreneurship and business startups and in the United States versus other countries, if you're in the Middle East, if you fail at a company, you can go to jail. In the United States, we have a whole culture and system and legal system. Why is that not? I mean, I don't want to ask you that right now because we don't have time. But I'm really intrigued with this. I mean, it's editorially interesting that we have a system in business and startups and whatnot that's built around it. But our feeders into that, whether they're pipelines or rivers or talent pools, is inculcated with a different set of norms. I mean, that's weird, right? So you can fix this in the Girl Scouts.
I think so. Can I ask Suzanne to make a comment? I think what the Girl Scouts have done around robotics and the badges is brilliant. Brilliant. I mean, you have figured out how to reach a population of a couple of million girls.
With a badge.
With a badge.
Wow.
And it's a symbol of success. It's bringing the curriculum into it. I mean, we've been working with the Girl Scouts around the whole digital online. I love it. You're teaching these girls to be entrepreneurs. You're teaching them. Can you comment on kind of how you came up with that and how it's working?
Well, I think badging has been in our DNA for more than 100 years. And now, of course, there's a lot of research that shows that badging non-Girl Scout badging, digital badging is actually extremely motivating.
Right.
I think to the point about hard fun and being willing to take on challenges, I remember watching the TED Talk that the man who founded Khan Academy did, where he said, you know, kids are doing calculus on Christmas Day because they can move up a level. So especially with STEM, where you really do have to learn specific things in order to move on, it made a lot of sense.
Big idea. Cheryl?
Yeah, I wanted to add another element to this discussion, which I'm really loving. I had a tenuous relationship really with my field in my early years, both as a chemical engineer and as a software engineer, and I was close to leaving. And it wasn't until I got to the point where I really stopped worrying about myself and started to worry about others and really have more of a purpose. And I have seen that translate now in my professional world, where I lead a team of technologists that are really focused on doing good in the world, and we're up at about 40% female, a number of underrepresented groups in the organization, and I think a lot of it is because we're so focused on purpose that we are attracting people that are willing to do the hard work to do something more meaningful than just maybe enriching themselves and their own lives. We're really proud of the partnerships that we're doing with the San Francisco School District and with the Oakland School District. We've already had employees give 175,000 hours of their own time with kids directly. Those moments and those partnerships are so meaningful to our employees that I see it keeping us and definitely for me, it has kept me in this field.
Alec, you get 30 seconds. Jeff, you get 30 seconds, and I'm going to the audience. Alec?
I think one thing that...
Louder.
I think one thing that's worth pushing back on, just in the framing of STEM, going back to some of the things we were talking about earlier, is that you wouldn't talk about creating a healthy nation by talking about pipelines for professional soccer players or professional football players or whatever, and that in expanding our notions of STEM, it has to go beyond controlling the path that somebody goes on and conceive of it more as a literacy or a fluency. Because I think otherwise, it's part of the tyranny of the GPA is that schools are asked to guide people along those paths, and all the incentives.
What I liked when I read about some of your work real quickly is that you were saying that the path to technology is through people's other passions. So maybe they like to make fashion, and so wearables or some other dimension, that we make a mistake by siloing technology away from everything else, that whether it's food or health or running or fashion, that there's a technology piece of that. I love that frame, and I didn't think you said it clearly enough. I want you to take some training on that. And,
and I think it goes back to the question of fun as well, because when Papper talks about hard fun, he means something very nuanced, I think, that doesn't come across in the word fun, and I would advocate for shifting that to something just that matters to people.
So. Jeff, I'm not leaving you to last because you're government. I mean, not last but least, but go ahead.
I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. Two things I wanted to talk about. One, I want to put in a plug for a bill that we're looking at right now, is to implement coding as part of the curriculum in all public schools, K to 12. So if you are interested in that, reach out to your legislature. That bill's pending right now. The second thing, and this was before I got involved in the legislature, because curricula and ideas are created actually at the local level in your local schools.
Right.
And when I was on the school committee before I got to the legislature, one of the projects that I was most proud of was creating a Franklin Arts Academy. And for those of you who are not from Massachusetts, that's ARTS, Arts Academy. And that was where we would combine mathematics and arts and literature and videography. And this was an entirely redesigned curriculum for these students. This is done in a public school in Massachusetts, and any of you can bring this to your communities and be innovators and encourage your local schools to change and react to what's going on in society. So I throw that out because that program has been thriving, and kids who were bored in school, who didn't enjoy waking up in the morning, are now rushing to get out the door, rushing to stay after school, doing their homework and doing very well and going on.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And first of all, give yourselves all a round of applause. You don't have to. It's really, you guys have been great. I want to put one big idea out there of my own, and I want to go to all of you. There's microphones at the table. Have a quick exchange. There's a lightning round. We won't have time for life stories today, but I do want to talk about life stories for a minute. A friend of mine is Ellen Stofan, who was the former chief scientist at NASA. I love Ellen Stofan. She's just an amazing, amazing ambassador, kind of this message, for women in science, women, and you spend time with her, and it's just, kind of it fuses out and it kind of affects you. And I sort of wanted to understand a little bit more. I interviewed her about how Ellen Stofan became Ellen Stofan. Like, what was her story? How did she get there? How did Joan become Joan? How did you become you? And what's interesting is understanding that picture and telling that picture in ways that where were the inflection points that mattered? What was the high school counselor you had to get by? Why are you in a certain area? I think, and this is my friendly critique of this issue, there are not enough people that have told their stories and documented. Katie is not here. She came closest on the Wikipedia side of this, of looking at this. But what's interesting is when I meet young people, they really want to know, and it may not just be women leaders, it may be an Elon Musk, or it may be someone else. How did that person live their life in such a way? What were the points? Maybe they're overprivileged and had high-end networks. How are you going to get beyond that? Who are some of the other stories where they overcame, some of the kind of bigotry or barriers in society? That's another element of this, which I think is important. So I don't know how you do it, but in terms of really putting things on the table that I think are missing, on the storytelling side, the Atlantic is a place of storytellers. I think there's not enough stories told by the people who got there, because I think there's a lot of market for that among the people who went to it. Joan, you had a two-finger.
So a comment about that, and it's the movie Hidden Figures.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And the stories that actually exist in our organizations that have never been told. And it is very difficult when I walk in a place and say there's nobody there. There's no women. There's no whatever.
Yeah. They're there.
They're there.
Oh my God, and the woman who wrote the book, I interviewed her in Chicago at this What's Next thing. She's amazing. And she was taking her grandmother's stories and kind of telling them out there. So it's also generational story. It's not just those women, it's somebody who could come out and translate them. I love that. And
Jen,
I love that.
I could not agree more. Yeah. It's crazy that it took 40 years to tell that story. And I actually think it also speaks to the role that Hollywood needs to play around putting these stories front and center. Because that Hidden Figures movie talked about the challenges they overcame and all of that.
The granddaughter of one of those women wrote the book. Then Hollywood. Look at all the people involved in that story who did not tell the story, right? It took a blood relative of one of them to go out and kind of push it and creatively capture our imaginations. That is an indictment against everyone else that was part of that story and let it be buried, right? So I just want to put that out there because I love it, but I'm also angry at all the people at IBM. Not to knock IBM. Yeah, okay. Any IBM? No, it's okay. But yes, where's my, hey, good to meet you. You're an IBMer? No, okay. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead. No, yeah, you are. I did. I sort of, but you put your hand up there at this very special moment.
Yeah, I just want to. So my name is Fanuel.
Yeah.
I direct one of the PhD programs at Harvard.
You're kind of not projecting, so
Sorry.
project. Yeah.
My name is Fanuel.
There you go.
I direct one of the PhD programs at Harvard in molecular and cellular biology. So that's my day job. Nighttime job, I co-found a group called STEM Advocacy, and we have an initiative right now called Stories in Science. And
great.
I would like to add on and say, not only should we tell stories of people who have made it, but people who are on their way to making it. So people like Lean over there.
Right.
Starting over at MIT right now. And that's really our mission over at storiesinScience.org. Please visit us.
Can you say that one more time slowly so the camera, millions of people are watching online.
StoriesinScience.org.
StoriesinScience.org.
And we love failure. And we're getting stories from around the world, not just the US. And it's amazing when you start reading them.
Right.
And you get to see the commonalities, the connections that we all share, the challenges. I mean, it's... And
don't want to cut you off, but I don't have enough time. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great.
Good. Megan.
Hi. So, my name is Megan. I want to go back to something that Alex said in the panel before, which is we usually think of STEM as this box that you need to break into. And because of that, we tend to think of STEM as one thing.
Right.
When actually it's 4 letters, 4 fields that are in everything.
Right.
So how do we show women, how do we show people that STEM is actually in everything, anything can be STEM, and then how do we encourage communication between those 4 letters?
Okay, quick responses. Grab a mic. grab a mic quickly. Yeah, Alec.
Something, at least on the school side, that I think we would really appreciate and could use is that I think too often we say, okay, we care about STEM, so we're going to convene a panel to put together materials, and that panel is going to talk to business leaders about what's in STEM, and it goes through this whole process instead of just going to the interesting work that is happening, instead of just going to Uber, instead of going to Twitter, and saying, not help us teach STEM, but just bring us into your work. Show somebody who might not make the connection between software engineering and marketing and copy editing, that all of those things are in kind of a pool in a company like Twitter, instead of breaking it apart and reintegrating it.
It's Christine, right?
Carla.
Or Carla.
Hi, I'm the Dean of the College of Computer and Information Science at Northeastern University. And the thing that troubles me so much about this pipeline or pathways or whatever you want to call it.
See, Abigail, what you opened up.
Is that it's not too late. So I came into computer science after first doing English. We've created a master's at Northeastern for people who didn't study computer science. We have programs for our non-computer science students to do what's called a meaningful minor in computer science, where we customize the curriculum to their primary field of interest. So this idea that we only have like this narrowing pipeline and we're getting desperate, we absolutely need to fix our K through 12 programs. And I wanted to push back on something that someone said, and I can't remember who it was this morning, about not making computer science required. I can give examples in high school and in colleges that when you make computer science required, 75% of people who try computer science love it and go on to take another course, and it is invariant of race and gender as long as you don't put a real loser on the class.
That's fascinating. Thank you, Lucy.
So
real quick, Anne.
Hey, I
and
just
then,
want to,
yeah, okay,
I
please,
want to respond to that.
Deb?
Two things, real quick. Number one, we need to stop the labels because it separates people, so
Right.
I'm in total agreement there. But I want to get to this issue about career and how it kind of people navigate it. And I agree with you completely. And people come on and off in careers all the time. But more importantly, there are programs that have been initiated, like the Innovation Corps from the NSF, which basically, I actually wrote a white paper on this, which was began to serve as the basis, where you bring mentors in on both sides to sort of shepherd people along from this on their own journey, help them identify what are the options, right? We talk about a day in the life.
Right.
People have no idea what people do, and just kind of helping them understand what's a day in my life, what's a day in your life, et cetera. So I think these programs are helping to kind of shape that directionally wherever people are in their lives.
Julie?
I'm going to pick up on another point that Abigail talked to, throughout your career, bringing women in. We think about it only from the, growing population, but we have a very mature population who want to have purpose too. And so you think about the role that that universities can play, with the virtual technologies that are available today to educate people. That is to me, that's a golden nugget that we have got to capitalize on, because there's 50% of the population at all ages is women. And, so it's, my mother actually graduated at 50 and went on to work for 25 years. So she had a career after she raised 6 children on her own. So it's this, it's this notion, there's a huge population we're not tapping into either. And we've got to use the capabilities that exist to our advantage here.
I mean, I really, somebody who has a privilege of dancing in a lot of these subjects and a lot of things that are related, one of the things that really bothers me most is talent on the table. I really love what you just said. And really what you're saying is ongoing education, because a lot of these stuff we're saying, okay, within sort of 3 or 4 years, you get programmed in college and packaged and you're done and that's it. But that's just not the way it is. We also have a lot of people that, frankly, have had problems in their life whenever. I'll tell you another, since you did stories in technology or whatever, I'm a stories in science. I'm thinking about processing a lot right now. Jim McKelvey, who created Launch Code in Miami and in St. Louis, he said there are 7 places to learn coding in St. Louis, and 5 of them are horrible. And so people come out with credentials and degrees that end up not being useful. And so he created Launch Code to both retrain people, take people that had health issues, but they were still damn good coders. They took people that had been incarcerated and were having a hard time and turned them, and they're all at various different points, in their lives. Then they couldn't get jobs because some IBM HR person said, we want to have the person out of this school or that, and or Cisco or Dell or whatever. And so Jim McKelvey then began using his celebrity as an innovator to call the CEOs of these companies and say, your HR departments are not taking the right kinds of risks in people. You're leaving talent on the table. And now he's placed thousands of people that they've trained in real jobs. So I don't want to put that on the table. You can get everything right. You can go get trained. You can go get coded. And you can still get screwed by the system that we're in. So I think it's important to be, when we think about villains, I won't say HR departments because they're getting better, but some are. And I think that's another element here about starting at any point in your life, that it's not all just in one place. So I want to go to Ann, but Ann, I gotta be nice to this table, and I'll come right back. Yes, Julie.
Yes, so Julie Drapala with 100K in 10. 100K stands for 100,000 new and excellent STEM teachers by 2021. And so I think today, there's been a lot of discussion about schools and curriculum, but I would love to hear more discussion about teachers. Teachers have the greatest impact on their students.
Mm-hmm.
How can they be supported before they're even in the classroom to really not just, teach a box curriculum, but really build the skills and build the experimentation and that ability to fail with their students. So I would just love
We're going
to
to
hear
put that
more about
teachers
that.
here. We're going
Yes.
to maybe put that in a post-up. Melanie?
I direct at MIT Career Services, Pre-Med Advising, and Study Abroad. And I want to come back to something that Karen talked about, which is the nature of the work. Because I have a lot of students who go out there and they try engineering or they try science, and they just feel like it's boring. So I think I want to put something on. We can do all the things we're doing here, but the villain can be the nature of the work. And is there an opportunity, and I'm sure some places are really evolving it, where that work can also meet the 21st century and look at different ways to do it so it is engaging. It's great to create a great experience, but if it's not really representative of what they're going to be doing that first few years, you won't retain it.
So everybody thinks MIT is great, and you're saying MIT is not that great.
We are great.
Yeah?
But getting them out there to the right opportunities, not always.
Ann?
So getting to what you just said, I'm a scientist, and the essence of being a scientist is not getting an A in chemistry, math, or physics. It's asking questions, being able to challenge authority, and everybody at the table of data who looks at the data and has a question should be able to speak up. This is what happens in good science. So if you want to do this as a teacher, you teach the students to challenge you on statements, et cetera, et cetera. And this is going to help, I don't care what people go into, being able to think logically and design what are the next steps to figure out where to go is going to help them wherever they go. My daughter always uses me as an example with her friends of somebody who sucks at math and physics but is a really great scientist. I did very, very well. I'm a biologist. I'm a virologist by training. But just opening you up to following your passions, but using logic and being able to challenge authority. Now, what kid doesn't want to do that? That's what a scientist does.
Let me go to Jen, and then James, and then stay lightning roundish. This is awesome. We're going to go as well as we can, and then we're not going to be able to get all your ideas unless you all grab mics the last time, but we're getting close to near the end. But yes.
So I'm Jen. I'm STEM on stage. I'm a technologist from Silicon Valley, and the question is with Mildred Dresselhaus. When she was a girl, she installed an operating system, and that was the biography of Marie Curie. Now, we think of famous names.
Right.
With STEM on stage, and the point I'm bringing up, I have a film from a technologist standpoint that is an operating system. We've been having screenings at MIT. People said for the first time, it's not just Marie Curie. Forget role modeling. Install an operating system.
Is your film online?
It will be out soon. It's only screened with live audience because we are an immersive film to time travel. If you want to see it at the physics department on October 11th at MIT, come visit. But recently, and we're starting a program in 2018.
When you eventually get it online, let me know.
Oh, no, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
You have to see it with people.
Okay,
Because you're visiting Marie in her lab, and she wouldn't want to do it online. She didn't exist in that time period. But here's the thing. Anna Friebel, an MIT physicist, recently portrayed Lisa Meitner on stage at the Folger Shakespeare Stadium or Library 2 weeks ago. And the question here is, what culture are we creating so people can install it? To read about something is different than experiencing it. So from a process perspective, what we need to do right now is make Curie a verb. I Curie something. I Meitner something. And that's what we're trying to do, not just with STEM on stage, and I'm as a public media project.
Right.
But the bottom line is this, our cultural gap is we don't recognize who we are in each other. So when you meet a scientist or someone in STEM, it's their method and their approach. They can say, I do this style of STEM. And then they can find each other.
Thank you. James, and then right here, Usha.
James Shirley from Asymmetrics. I've heard a lot of wonderful thoughts today, and I just want to add another thought that's implicit in what's been said, but it's often overlooked, and I want to make it explicit. As we try to help in whatever way for these types of issues, we bring to the problem ourselves, which is all we really can do. But we have to think about who we're trying to help. We have to try to understand the vast range of types of problems that lead to the main one we're talking about. I'm no longer a professor at MIT, but I used to be, and when I was there, I did pre-med advising. I still do pre-med advising, and while I was there, I didn't advise the typical 8 students who are all going to do pretty well. I asked for those students who were struggling. And each one of them is very different, and helping them means that you have to get to understand what their specific problems are, what their stories are, in order to be able to help them move forward. Thank you.
I love that story. I just want to, I'm not pushing Dell because it's not my editorial job to do that, but that film that they ran in there about that young girl that had not spoken, it really impacted. It sounded like the person there. That person would have been somebody left behind had that experience not happened. But Usha, short form.
So very short form.
Yeah.
So, if people have heard me the last session, I'm from South Africa. Before STEM was even an acronym, and
Right.
then we progressed it to STEAM. I have 3 thoughts, in terms of how do we profile young individuals from the time they are, I would say from 6 to 10 years
Right.
of age, so that we could nurture them moving forward. And then the second stage is how do we look at different nurturing streams so that we could support them adequately. And then the third part is, as a community here, how do we propel them in the in industry and in the corporate world? And I'm talking about somebody that's in a third world environment, from having nothing to having now 3 kids
Right.
in this field.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And right here. I disagree. I'm glad to have him. I think that this is here, but as a programmer in this, I'm always, I think I welcome that, but it's partly why we brought Eric's daughter, why we brought someone from Harvard, and yes, there are others. But I also want to tell you that, because as a programmer in this and just want to do this, that it's their it's our responsibility to hear where they're at. It's also our responsibility collectively to kind of deal with the macro issues, because we sometimes get lost in what we think. Oh, if we meet micro person, that somehow we can aggregate that from answers. But I've been in enough of these where I love it. It's sort of you miss this person. There's enough talent in this room to systemically change the system. And yes, it would be great to have them, sure, but that's not something that mortally wounds this group. This group has a responsibility to take the people and frameworks and experiences here and change them. So I love your idea, but there's a bigger responsibility among here that we shouldn't be putting on someone in high school. So anyway, no, I don't at all. Really quick, Mahala, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I'm the operational head of the Life Sciences Strategy Consulting Group at Ernst & Young.
Hold it up.
I
30
was
seconds.
a cell biologist
Yeah.
by training before I went into business. My question is kind of related to what the discussion was earlier around the idea of science is something that's creative, science is something that's inquisitive thought. And so what my question is, how do we go about changing culture, not just in STEM, but our culture broadly in the States, so that's one of basically critical thinking. This applies to our perception of thoughts in facts and media, et cetera, to our science education.
Right.
So is this through play? Is this sort of something else? How are we going to approach that as culture?
Thank you. I want to thank everybody. I think that we're going to go around, and I would love to just get any quick snapshots, 15-second or less, that some of you may have. We just have a limited runway here. But what I really appreciate is we turned many of you into panelists to sort of say, what could we do? What are the practical things we can do? And I think, again, we did pretty well. Over here, it's Stacy, right? Stacy has, grabbed colors and ideas and lines, and I'm sure that she's X through pipeline somewhere up there. Oh, she did. I didn't even know you did it. Pipeline now, block the pipe. That is We're on the same page. And I'm going to ask our friends at Dell to make sure that those of you who are in the room, and I'm not even sure we know everyone who's in the room now, so if you would like a copy of this sent to you, can we send it to them? Okay, great. So we'll get a picture of this and send it to all of you so that you have it. Stacy, have that. But I want to say, I want to thank everybody, because part of this is not relitigating everything. And when I responded to you, I sort of do think, yes, we need to do it, but there's an incredible amount of capacity in this room and responsibility, power in this room. There's a ton of power in this room. So I hope you will not look at this as an afternoon you've had before a buffet lunch that, I just did another education thing, STEM and women, but that it was consequential for you in some ways. So, Joan?
So you talked about these multiple points of entry, exit, and re-entry. But I want to go back to this point of what is meritocracy and what is excellence and what is good and what counts. What does leadership look like? So if we don't reframe who we think is worthy of being moved forward, then we're really not going to address a fundamental part of the problem.
Thank you so much. Cheryl, quick.
I think it's great to talk ideas. I think there are a lot of amazing ideas already working, and it's going to take public and private partnership. It's going to take amplification, all of us coming together. We've seen already, so with our 5-year partnership with San Francisco School District, we've helped them with infrastructure, with teacher training, with getting computer science in middle school and high school, and we've seen a 2,000% increase in girls taking computer science, and a 66,000% increase of underrepresented minorities taking computer science. That's going from idea to action and seeing real results, and we just all need to keep barreling full steam ahead.
Thank you. Deb?
Quick, this is a call out to the women in this room. Okay, so
A little bit louder.
call out to the women in this room. Girl on girl crime, let's get rid of it. Pull your female partners forward. Okay, seriously. It's not zero sum. Flip it upside down. It's really lots of opportunities. Find the cracks and help each other
Thank you
forward.
for saying that, because it's a taboo subject. There are a lot of women running companies, and you look at those companies, and the culture in them on exactly the things
Could be toxic.
sucks.
Toxic.
You know? Right, yeah.
We need to be supportive of each
right,
other.
thank you very much. Andrea, last word, and then I'm going to go to Karen, and then, wow, okay, yes. Yeah, I'm definitely not going to skip Andy over there. Yeah.
So,
good, yeah.
Start younger, because everything we can do to bring every single kid
Right.
into literacy and STEM at very early stages is going to help every
Great, thank you.
single
Andy?
kid.
Stop lowering our standards. High expectations of our kids, high expectations of our girls. Bill Gates had a commencement speech for a high school class that I suggest you all go listen to, because it's great. Get up, make your bed. You're not all winners. You got to work for it. Tough work is rewarding. Get on with it, expose yourselves and do it. So let's stop lowering our standards so everyone's a winner and all the rest of it. Our kids want discipline.
Right.
Our kids want structure, and they want to be challenged, just like we all were. So let's not shortchange them from that.
Abigail?
Just wanted to say, there's been so much emphasis also on,
A little closer.
there's been a lot of emphasis on STEM strictly as a career thing. And I think what we've also learned is we have to spark that passion, because if you are passionate about the subject, you're more likely to stay in it no matter what happens, which is why Girl Scouts have their fantastic badges. We have our Tech Trek camps. Your girls are coming to this and saying, I want to stay in STEM no matter what the problem is. And that's what we have to do. And I think that's why Little Bits is so great as well. It sparks that passion. It can't just be about making the money at the end.
Karen, I'm going to give you the final word, and thank you for bringing us all together. And then Emily, you can take it. Tell us what we're doing next.
Yeah, hey, I have to tell you, I have been blown away by the feedback, the passion, the energy. Steve, you said it best when you said, there are enough people in this room to systematically change this trajectory. And I think, a step here, a step there, a step here, the cumulative impact of all of that, if we all commit coming out of this room, that we will continue to do something and have an impact in this area. And there's a lot of really consistent themes that, I've been sitting here taking notes and actually putting little check marks around how many times people said role models, amplification, storytelling, curriculum that is fun, and I will never use the word pipeline again.
Thank you. Well, I want to say thank you to Karen and to Dell for making today possible. We really appreciate your support. Thank you, Steve. You did a masterful job, as always, of playing our Phil Donahue today and getting all of the perspectives out here in the room. Okay. And we are going to share everyone's contact information in the next week or so. So we want you all to stay connected with each other, and you don't have to leave. We're going to have lunch outside in just a minute. It should be out there ready for us. So please stay, continue to have conversations, and thank you again for joining us.